Well, greetings to you. I return again to the Ukraine. I've done one or two videos explaining how we got where we are and the rather aggressive expansion of NATO eastward, which was going to run into trouble, and I've published on this on many occasions in the past, that sooner or later we'd run into trouble if we expanded NATO against our agreement as much as we have. Sooner or later the Russians were going to take a look at the Baltic and look at Eastern Europe and say, just a minute, thus far and no further. And of course that's exactly what they've done. Now, what did they try and do, the Russian Federation? They made a tactical mistake in my view. They tried to have a limited warfare campaign, limited so that they could actually use special forces to protect the ethnic Russians in their enclaves in the east of the Ukraine, which has been traditionally Russian, and the Crimea, which of course had a plebiscite a little while ago to confirm that they wanted to remain as part of the Russian Federation. Anyway, leaving all that aside, that's something quite different. I might come back to that in just a minute. But what I want to do today is to talk to you about Russian military doctrine. And it isn't really like ours. They believe in wars of army movement. They have thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, millions of men, and almost unlimited space. So they don't view warfare the way we view it very often. And one thing that they learned in the Napoleonic Wars was the concept of scorched earth policy. So you retreat and retreat and retreat, and you use your country and your weather as your main shield of defence. And that's what they did, and that's how they defeated Napoleon. They did the same thing to defeat Hitler in World War II. They drew back and back and back, and they eventually entrapped the German army in and around Stalingrad. And because they were under no political direction to hold ground, which is always fatal to a general or a field marshal, they could bring the German army to battle, which is what they did, and they defeated them. The British army sometimes get bogged down with political holding of ground. We found that was in Ypres, in the salient, where we were looked over and cost us tens of thousands of men because we didn't make a tactical withdrawal. The Germans made a strategic withdrawal to the Hindenburg Line in the 1914-18 show, and that proved to extend the war. Didn't help them, didn't save them, but it was strategically a good thing to do. Hitler had political views, and he wanted to hold ground. He was only a corporal, nothing wrong with corporals, good chaps, but he didn't really know much about strategic warfare any more than our politicians and our journalists do today. Now, just to make that very clear, I'm trained in geopolitical and military warfare, and I'm published. This is my dissertation. This is my dissertation to win that accolade. And I'm not your golf club gobshite or your muppet in the saloon bar who read this morning's Daily Express and thinks he understands warfare. He doesn't understand warfare. And as I go back to say what I was saying is that Hitler trapped his own army in the Falaise Gap, and he lost his army by trying to hold ground in Russia around Stalingrad, and indeed in the very areas that we're talking about today in the Ukraine and the Crimea. So this is what the Russians actually think. So they have made a strategic withdrawal in order to bring the Ukrainian army to battle. They're not interested in holding ground or holding or capturing towns and all the rest of it for any sort of short-term political prestige. And of course, the classic example of that was General Mark Clark in the Italian campaign in the Second World War, who let the German army escape by wanting to be the first into Rome. He saw himself as a very vain man, very stupid man, cost a lot of lives. Now, the Russian generals don't think like that. They're far more canny. They're withdrawing in order to bring the Ukrainian army to battle on their terms. Incidentally, I'm not taking sides on this. I'm just telling you how it is, because you're not getting any information from mainstream media, journalists or politicians or anybody else. We're just pouring money into this bottomless pit, which seems to go on and on forever, and we seem to learn nothing. All we're doing is extending the war, and like Vietnam and all the wars since, up to just recently Afghanistan, this war cannot be won. Can't be won by the West. It can't be won. Logistically, numbers, nothing, it just can't be won. So what's actually happening now is the Russians are building up their forces for a main thrust, a winter campaign. The chance of peace has gone. It was several months ago. There was peace on the table. It could have been done by plebiscite and all sorts of things that could have been done for those who wanted peace. But it seems in the West, especially in Washington, they don't want peace. They want perpetual warfare. And indeed, as I said this before, since 1776, when they had independence from the British Empire, the Americans have been at war for all that time, with the exception of 13 or 14% of that time. They are a warlike nation. They are a warlike nation. I think it's a shame. I'm not anti-American. I've got lots of American friends. They seem to thrive on war, and the industrial military congressional Congress seems to wag the dog. No good will come of this. No good will come of this. The Russians will trundle forward with all the logistics supply, all the weaponry they need, which the West is desperately short of, NATO is desperately short of, and eventually they will sue. The Ukrainians will have to sue for peace on Russian terms. Unnecessary. A few months ago, it could have been done on a much more equal basis. The Russians won't put up now. We've had our chance and we blew it. And I'm afraid that's what's going to happen. So when the winter offensive starts, you'll see they trundle forward. Do not believe our chief of staff, who's a political, all our senior generals are political, who are telling us that the Russians have no boots and their rifles are rusty, so on and so forth. Don't believe a word of it. This will pan out over the winter and you'll see that I'm right. And we'll have to come to the negotiating table from a position of weakness, not strength. And we brought it on ourselves. As most of you know, my work is very heavily independently research based, and I get my information from all over the world. It would help if you press the subscribe button and the little bell next to it, because the more subscribers I have, the more likely it is that international independent research institutes will share their material with me. It's most helpful, and then of course I automatically share it with you. So surprise, won't cost you anything. Thank you very much.